Yeah. If anyone over the Zoom can hear me, can you please say something in the chat? Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, amazing. Okay, great. So I'm just going to have the panelists each unmute themselves and just introduce themselves. As you can see here, we have all of their backgrounds on our slide. So just want to thank all of them for coming again. And yes, go ahead with this portion.
Cool. I guess I will go first because my name is listed first. Hi, everyone. I'm Smriti. I was a former peer mentor just a few years ago. So very interesting to see Whitehall after so long. But as the slide says, I graduated in 2020. And I majored in human health, minored in dance, and I'm currently in a gap year right now preparing for med school applications. And I have experience in behavioral therapy, and that's like something big I did during my gap year, and I'm currently pursuing a master's. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Minhee. I graduated last year, spring 2021. I was a peer mentor for a year. I graduated with an anthropology and human biology degree, and I actually took one gap year. So I will be attending University of Pennsylvania School of Dental Medicine this fall to pursue my dental medicine choice.
Hey guys, my name's Annette. I graduated in the class of 2020. I got my Bachelor of Science in Environmental Science and an MPH in Environmental Health through the 4+1 program. And right now I'm at MCG studying medicine, but I still don't know what specialty I want to do yet. So it's been a fun year.
Okay, perfect. Thank you all so much. So we just have a couple of questions prepared that I'm just going to pull up right now. And then for everyone here at the event itself, there will be a time for y'all to ask any additional questions you might have. So definitely take the time to think of any. There'll be some time for that. Okay, perfect. And we have another panelist who will be joining us shortly as well. So our first question is, when did you realize you wanted to take a gap year and how did you come to that decision? And so I think we're going to have two panelists probably answer for every question, just so we can get to all of the questions. But if you feel like you have a really personal story or you want to answer this, you can just go ahead and unmute yourself.
I can start because I kind of had like an immediate thought when I saw this question. So I was a freshman in 2016, not to age myself, but I was a freshman in 2016. And I think around that year was when gap years were just starting to kind of become in conversation. I still remember talking to Anil, who was my advisor at the time, about kind of like what that would look for me. And it really kind of came from this internal decision of, I just want more experience. I kind of just want some time like away from the pre-med world in like a real life clinical setting of some sort. I felt really passionate about like my intentions for going into medicine, which were pretty clear back then as well. And I kind of was like, I just want to be able to offer whatever experience I have to my future patients and relate to them in any way. So those sort of thoughts kind of just formed throughout my freshman year. And after freshman year was done, I started volunteering at Gigi's Playhouse downtown the Achievement Center and got more experience in just different sort of populations. And it was just kind of like this hodgepodge of experiences plus my intentions for wanting to go into medicine that came together and made me realize like taking a gap year or like a few years would not be any sort of step back, but instead would really just make me closer to the future physician that I want to be. So it was really driven by those type of like intrinsic motivators.
Thank you so much. That was a really in-depth answer, and I hope that everyone here who like might also be feeling that way kind of took something away from that and keep it in mind when coming to a decision about their timeline. Yeah, do any of the panelists, actually, before we have any of the other panelists answer this question, we just had our fourth panelist join us. So Michelle, do you mind quickly introducing yourself?
Yeah, hi. Thank you. Sorry for coming a little bit late. But yeah, my name is Michelle. I graduated from Emory in spring of 2020, right when the pandemic started, with a biology degree. And then I took one gap year where I did scribing actually at the Emory emergency room, both in Midtown and at the main hospital location. And now I am a student M1 here at MCG in Augusta, Georgia. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what I want to do in the future in terms of specialty. Very, very open right now to just completely exploring and learning about what my interests are.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Michelle. And then does anyone else want to answer this question? Should move on to the second one.
I can also answer this because I didn't kind of come up with this decision until later in my career. I decided to take a gap year, maybe, let's see, maybe my junior year / my senior year. So I graduated in Emory in 3 years. I graduated 1 year early. And so it was either I go straight into dental school after 3 years or I take a gap year or two. And so it was a really hard decision, but I think one of the things that kind of pushed me towards taking a gap year was, like Smriti said, I did have a passion for dentistry. I wanted more clinical experience. I know the minimum requirement was, I think for dental schools was 100 hours, but without 100 hours, I still didn't feel confident in terms of what the clinical looked like, and I didn't just want to meet the requirement for application wise, and so I wanted more hands-on, but then I also wanted to do research. And so I think that gap year, I was like, oh, 1 year, I did graduate early, but two, even if I had to take 2 gap years, it wouldn't hurt. And so I think during my junior year towards spring semesters when I kind of started applying to different opportunities to fill up my gap year. And I also talked to my pre-health advisor, Anil, and I kind of talked about my different options. And in the end, I really wanted more hands-on experience, which I am really glad I did. Plus my gap year was at home. And so I got to spend family time, but also increase my clinical skills in preparation for my professional health school. And so even now, when I look back on it, I don't regret it at all. If I could, I would even take an additional gap year, seeing now I actually am really enjoying my time at home. But I think it really did give me the opportunity to pursue what I wanted to do and what I wouldn't have been able to do if I were a full-time student at Emory.
Yeah, thank you so much for that answer. And I think that one thing I've like heard that has really stuck with me, like in my own like experience with gap years, is like no one ever really regrets taking a gap year. So it's definitely something to keep in mind that a lot of people who have taken gap years will constantly say. So our next question is, how did you search for gap year opportunities? I feel like we covered this in the lecture portion, so we don't need to make answers for this too long because we kind of gave you guys a lot of different opportunities and kind of different sort of sources and resources you could use in order to search for gap year opportunities. But I'd love to hear how some of our panelists were able to use those resources and also look for any gap year opportunities.
Yeah, I can go. I scribed at an ophthalmology office in Atlanta, and I actually found that off the pre-health advising blogs. I would definitely recommend looking through that, not only for gap year opportunities, but they also post a lot of research and stuff, as you guys probably know. So I think that's a fantastic resource. Also, I found as a part of my MPH, I worked with a community group called the Center for Black Women's Wellness. which is also something that works with an organization here at Emory. So I got connected to that through a faculty member. So I think if there's a faculty that do something that you're really interested in, kind of talk to them and see if they can get you connected with any gap year opportunities as well. But make sure you do something that you're really excited about, and because the year will fly by, and I think it's just a great way to kind of explore your other interests as well.
Yeah, thank you. Does anyone else want to talk about how they also look for their gap year opportunities?
I can talk a little bit as well. So I worked at the ED at Emory. Originally, I wasn't super sure what I wanted to do in my gap year, but I knew that I wanted to do something clinical related. I actually kind of solidified my decision to do medicine rather late. I was pre-med originally in college, then I switched to pre-pharm, and then I switched back to pre-med. And so I knew that for my gap year, I wanted to do something more clinical related so I could gain more experience, and really just to make sure that this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, right? And so I also followed the PHA blog. I did a bit of research on my own by honestly just looking up on like Glassdoor, websites like that for job hirings for new scribes. And I had also heard through a friend who was a previous scribe at the ED that it could be a possibility for me to work there. So for the Emory ED specifically, there was an application process that I did online. Then I did an interview with them and did some training, and I began shortly after. But like Grace, with like Ine was saying just before, I would definitely say whatever you do during your gap year, try to search for something that you know, not just that like maybe you need to do, or something that you feel like can help you in your career. I would say also to look for something that you think you would truly enjoy, because I feel like gap year is definitely a very precious time before you go into whatever field you're going into. It's a time for you to explore what you're interested in, develop hobbies, you know, like reconnect with friends and stay connected with friends. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michelle. Okay, our next question is, when did you have your gap year plans finalized by? And I think that from what we've heard, I feel like actually this question got answered, but really there's never like a certain time that you need to have your gap year plans finalized by. It's okay to take extra time. I know people who found gap year experiences midway through their summer. It's really not like the length that you complete your gap year experience, but how meaningful it is to you. And I think like what you gain from that experience and how you can talk about it. So even if you're graduating soon and you don't have a set gap year position, it's okay. You still have time to look for it. There's never like a specific due date for this. It's just, you can always get these experiences if you just kind of do the work and look for them. So I think this is a really amazing question that honestly we could probably have all of the panelists answer. What personal qualities or skills did you develop during your gap year, and which ones do you think are necessary to succeed?
I can tackle this one first, the big question for sure. So I'll talk about my experience as a behavioral therapist, formerly a registered behavior technician. So I have kind of always, at least for the past few years, had an interest in pediatrics and specifically developmental behavioral pediatrics, which of course I'm keeping my mind open, but that's where I'm at right now. And serving in this space as a behavior therapist basically meant that I was delivering behavioral therapy to children with autism. So I was working on an entire care team consisting of their pediatrician, a board certified behavior analyst, and then myself. So I would go in, and this was during the pandemic as well. It was considered first line healthcare as well. So I would go into their homes or go into a center, and every single day for like anywhere from 3 to 5 hours per each child I was with, just do certain activities and do repetitive type of programs and things like that to get them to functionally communicate. So for me, what I really witnessed over the year was a lot of change from the way that a child would be able to communicate their needs and wants. Like even from a child that was very nonverbal, we were able to develop so many skills with that. So it was a very like beautiful experience to have. And I think personally, when I look inward, it's not just that it, primed me to be like a better future physician, which it definitely did, but I think very specifically, it helped me get really tangible experience on what it means to include not just a child, but like their family as well as part of the care team, and communicate across different levels of people's understanding of like what I do. And there was just so much trust that was put in me to be able to deliver that type of healthcare, especially during a pandemic. So I guess like if I were to sum it up, I learned a lot about what action steps really look like with patients and their families on the day-to-day, which I think is very rare experience. I learned a lot about just diligence because it was repetitive work every single day. And those two things are definitely necessary for the quote unquote definition of success. But I think one of the biggest things is that I gained a lot of self-confidence in the abilities that I acquired. And I was like, wait a second, it's not just that I graduated from Emory and I got the grades and like whatever, and like I'm a student, but it was like, wow, I have the self-confidence to know that I'm going to be a med student one day and I'm going to be a future physician one day. And walking into an application season with that type of confidence is absolutely key because it's a very anxiety inducing process. So gaining that sort of experience during a gap year and being able to present yourself as the best candidate possible for the right reasons, I think is just like perfect experience. Sorry, that was long.
No, that was incredible. Thank you so much.
That is a hard answer to beat. But I also worked in a clinical setting. As a dental student, I worked as a dental assistant, which is equivalent to like a medical assistant if you're looking into a clinical experience job other than scribing. And so essentially I chairside assisted. I really helped with treatment planning, communicating to patients, really learning the administrative aspect of it, but also the providing the care aspect. I think it was really, from what I've shadowed or volunteered through different clinics, I gained an experience that I didn't get from those. I got to understand more so the socioeconomic barriers that comes with different patients. I mean, I think the financial side of it is always the biggest barrier that prevents patients from coming in. I really learned how to deal with patients from like who are, veterans or really old people or really young kids. I think just like the variety of people interaction really helped me with my social skills, even developing after college when I'm at home and most of my friends are still in college. And I think succeeding wise, it goes a long way. Whatever you do, whether that's clinical experience or, like your passion, your interest in your hobby, I think that time really allows you to really strengthen your purpose for why you're pursuing something. So when you're so sure and you're confident, this is why I want to pursue the profession I want, it really does give you that passionate response when you go into the application cycle, when you answer short answers, or when you're in an interview. Like those interviewers can tell they know what they want and they know how to get there. And so I think that aspect of that background and being able to communicate that without explicitly even stating that passion really exudes out of you when you're talking about it. And I think whatever you do during that gap year, you can really find that and strengthen your application in whatever way you want to succeed.
Yeah, I think I'd like to build on what Minnie just said, that I think using your gap year as a time to find what you love to do outside of school is so important and cool. Just because once you're in school, you're going to be, studying a lot. You're going to have a lot less time to do some of the things you like. So I really like that in the gap year, you can pursue, your hobbies. A big component of med school is really learning how to like not burn out and really take care of yourself. So I think it's really important to be able to learn like what you love to do in your free time. For instance, like I learned how to play golf in the past year, and it's just been really fun to kind of do something outside and keep me active. So I would definitely encourage all of you, if you are considering to do a gap year, to also pursue your other interests.
I can talk a little bit as well. I really like what Ane and he was saying as well about the developing interests outside of whatever career you're going into. I think that's a really great. Those are whatever skills or like qualities that you learn with other hobbies are things that you can definitely take throughout the remainder of your career. Definitely recommend that as well. I guess like specifically like related to my gap year job in terms of skills, qualities. I think a couple of like really big pluses of where I worked was that honestly I was able to see firsthand and maybe like sometimes for the first time what medicine was really like in front of me throughout shadowing, throughout volunteering. Definitely, I was able to see what roles physicians had, but I don't think it was really until I stepped into a working role and had a position where I played a small role in helping advance patient care was when I really saw what the field was really like. And that kind of helped me understand what it was that I really liked about medicine specifically, and maybe what I didn't like necessarily. And that kind of helped me figure out how I wanted to pursue medicine in the future, also how I wanted to talk about what I was doing during my interview and applications. I did apply during my gap year. A couple other things that I really liked that I about my gap year job was that I was able to see different members of the medical team work together. So I was able to visualize the physician's role, specifically in the team with nurses, techs, clerks, scribes, and then other levels of providers from NPs to PAs and also like residents. And then one like kind of like side thing was that like my job, since it required me to have night shifts, it also kind of like let me see what it was like to kind of work a job where I might be required to have night shifts and chug coffee quite a bit. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you all. Those were all really amazing answers. Okay, so I think we kind of answered this, like, do you need to do something pre-health related during your gap year? I think we talked about this during the lecture portion, so I won't go into this and ask the panelists this. But even though all of our panelists, I believe, did do something pre-health related, it is not totally necessary. Programs like Teach for America, City Year, working a job in the real world, like all of these will give you the skills and qualities that could prepare you for medical school. I think when you're thinking about your gap year, just think about what you want to explore further. If you want more clinical experience, then you're looking to go into medical field, then perhaps pre-health related gap year experience would be helpful. But if you feel like you want to learn how to become a professional, then maybe working a job would be better. Or if you want to learn how to build that one-on-one relationship with different people, then tutoring or teaching is a great way to do that. So you always will have something to talk about on your applications. It's all about what you gain from that experience and how you can explain how it helped you grow as an applicant and as someone considering a graduate school program. So now we're going to open up to the audience. And so does anyone here have any questions for any of the panelists? You can ask specific panelists or you can ask to all of them in total. So I'll give you some time to raise your hand, see if you have any questions. Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm a senior who's considering taking a gap year. Well, not considering it's actually going to happen, but I'm really not sure yet what I plan on doing. I kind of got everything that I wanted to accomplish out of college, like grades, extracurricular wise, like I already have those established. The only thing left I haven't taken was the MCAT. So I know I'm going to be spending my summer prepping for it. And I wanted to ask about if anybody else of the panelists took their MCAT after college, and maybe how do you go about structuring your MCAT prep, but also still being able to enjoy yourself?
I can take that one actually. So I actually retook the MCAT during my gap year, but kind of like the same process. And basically what that looked like for me is I kind of delayed starting work until after. So it was kind of like I spent, I think 3.5-ish months studying like hardcore for the MCAT, like books, UWorld. We can talk about that too. Or I'm sure like the peer mentors can also like help you with a study schedule if that would be of use to you. But really just making sure that nothing else is kind of in the way except for MCAT studying. And if you're planning on applying, during MCAT studying, like in that summer as well, then just like split your time between both things. So for me, because I took more than one gap year, I was applying, or I'm getting ready to apply like the year after I took the MCAT. So I didn't have to really worry about balancing MCAT with applications, but I kind of on the back of my mind, in the back of my mind, I was balancing MCAT studying with onboarding for work. So with all of that, I would just say like really schedule out your timing and make sure that you prioritize like having your MCAT study schedule and see how many months you want to like completely dedicate to it. I think the summer, especially the early summer, so like right after graduation, give yourself, some breathing space, and then just like really hit the ground running with studying. And then you can kind of tackle like starting your gap year thing. And then we can kind of like talk a little bit more if you're planning to apply during the same year as well. I don't know if that helped too much, but long story short, just like timing is everything and just making sure you outline when you want to do certain things.
Yeah, that was such a good question. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I just saw some panelists unmute themselves.
Yeah, no worries. I guess I was kind of in a similar situation in terms of like timing of my application in MCAT because I was going to take my MCAT April of 2020, but with the COVID pandemic, it got pushed back to June. So I was kind of in that cohort of people that had to kind of apply for submit your primaries and then take my MCAT and then write secondary. So in hindsight, I do think it was a pretty like stressful season, especially like not knowing how to make a school list because I don't have an MCAT score or anything. And I was also onboarding it for the job at the same time. But what I did was I took like a part-time schedule at first. So I could spend a couple of days a week just focusing on the MCAT. And then once I took it, then I, started working full-time there. And I think that most places will be really understanding of that if you're really transparent about it. So I think that is what I would recommend to you.
Okay, great. That was such a good question. I'm sure like a lot of people had that question as well. And I think it's like pretty common to take the MCAT during the gap year as well. But any other questions from the audience right now? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering if any of the panelists worked full-time and if working full-time straight out of college was more of a burden or whether they were able to balance their personal and professional life having had a full-time job.
I can take this one. So I worked full-time. I worked full-time basically all year, even after I got into medical school, because I felt like I actually really enjoyed my job and I just wanted to keep doing it until I needed to quit for school, basically. But I would definitely say I feel like I had ample time for personal life. I think I had more time than I did in undergrad, to be honest, because I know with like studying with school, you kind of end up piling a lot of things together each day, and you might have clubs, extracurriculars, things like that. But during my gap year, because I was just doing a job and also, applying for med school, I only really had those two things. And because I was applying and working during the pandemic year, some of the extracurriculars like volunteering I wanted to do, that was kind of pushed aside anyways. So I actually had quite a bit of ample time to really just relax, hang out with my family and friends, watch a lot of Netflix. I watched more Netflix in my gap year than I did my entire life. And honestly, I really do not regret that because I feel like it was some of the most fun time. And I feel like in terms of like hobbies and things like that, I certainly feel like if you're able to, you can do that. And also I have a few friends who took gap years, worked full-time jobs, and they also traveled throughout the year. They would put in like advance notices and then go travel. And that's something that I heard is also like a recommendation from other people.
I can also add on to that. I worked as a dental assistant full time. My work actually started like 6:30 and I ended at 5. Early, but ended, quite a little bit of time left over. I think in the beginning when I only did that job, I didn't realize how much time I had compared to college. I think college was always studying, and even if it was an exam that week, it's always like preparing for something. I don't remember me thinking, oh, I'm done with something when I was in college. And that might just be me. And if that's me, that's good for you guys. You guys know how to manage your time really well. I ended up, I read more books than I ever could. I also watched Netflix. I did not have time to do that in college. I actually took so many trips. So I would get off like Friday, usually like bi-weekly. And so I took a trip to New York. I visited Emory frequently because my class is still a senior right now. I also went to Tennessee. I went everywhere every weekend whenever I could. So I was kind of like a work hard, play hard mentality. You can make the most out of it. You can burn yourself out or not. But I think using the time wisely, just literally, do whatever you wanted to do, what you've been wanting to do, but you couldn't because college and exams prevented you to do so. And when you let all that out, I think when you go into medical school or dental school or optometry school, wherever you go to, I think you release that already. And so studying hard will make you want to study, essentially. It's hard to believe now, but right now I want to study because I relax a lot. So that's just where I am right now.
Perfect. I think I saw another hand go up. Were there any other questions for gap year panelists? I think we can do one more question maybe. Yeah, ask away.
Maybe as a final note, is there any final advice that you would have wished somebody would have told you when you guys were taking your gap years?
I love that question.
Honestly, I think the best advice I got during the process of deciding if I even wanted a gap year was to just really enjoy it. It's going to be fun. It's going to, flash by. And even though like sometimes you may think like, oh, like why didn't I just apply straight through and like get a year out? I think the experiences that you gain in that year are so like important, not only like personally, but also academically. So like, for instance, with my MPH in environmental health, like I'm trying to start incorporating that into some of our medical school curriculum. And so it's just like make the most of that year as possible, and just really enjoy yourself because it'll really be like a great memory to hold on to when you're studying for like in med school and stuff. But also med school is fun. Don't worry. I hope I'm not scaring anyone. But it definitely is a time commitment. So I think that just, really enjoy that year.
I will also add to that. I loved that answer and I echo it. I think the biggest thing that helped me was along the lines of like be realistic, but also very intentional. Like those two things are not mutually exclusive. So be realistic when you look at your application and where you stand right now. And if there is something that you could strengthen, use that to guide your searches for your gap year options. So start from there. And then the intentionality aspect comes in for like, don't try to, there's not 100% wrong in doing this, like people do it, but don't try to curate the perfect list of the coolest type of gap year opportunity that you think will really make like you know, you the coolest person on the street. Like really just come from a place of passion, because that will just exude whenever you talk, whenever you like wake up in the morning and go to work or go to research or whatever your gap year option is. And again, like really just keep your end goal close to your heart and in sight of like, why am I doing this? I'm doing this for my future patients, right? Like, why am I gaining this experience? Because I'm passionate and I'm not just trying to be like, you know, a type A pre-med student that only has cool things on my resume, but because I genuinely care. And if both those are the same two things, that's also fine. But yeah, be realistic and be intentional, because that's really what's going to get you through.
Bouncing off of that, I think the advice I would give to anyone doing gap year is there is no wrong answer. It's not what you do, it's just, you know, how you perceive it and what you gain out of it. And like I mentioned so many times, it doesn't have to be clinical. It will, you can, whatever you do, as long as it makes you a better person that you, and it makes you grow, I think will make you stand out for your goals. And so honestly, like search, it doesn't have to be something unique. It doesn't have to be something that's like over the top, like, you know, better than other people. It can be the same thing that other people do, but it can also be some interesting thing of your passion. And when you do that, I think, you know, whatever it is, I think you should enjoy your gap year. And so if you don't like what you're going to do during your gap year and it's just part of a resume, I feel like that's just a waste of your mental energy and strength. So
Yeah, perfect. Well, that was like a great last question to end on. And with that, I just want to thank our panelists again for taking the time like out of their really busy schedules to be here with us. Like give them like a round of applause. Yeah, thank you so much. And to everyone who is here at the meeting, we will send you out the PowerPoint and all the information. So expect an email. And finally, we have an attendance form, but give me 1 second because it's on the other PowerPoint. So we'll get that pulled up. Okay.
Yeah.
if anybody has questions, we're here. Thank you to our panelists.
Yeah,
Y'all
so-
are awesome.
Just use the QR code to sign in really quick.